Well, as Peter said, I'm on my way to London very shortly, and that is a certain type of journey. And we can measure that journey very simply at any point in the, whatever it is, 14 hours that I'll be on the plane. The computer on the plane will be able to tell us exactly how far we've gone and how much further we've got to go. We can say there's a journey which we can measure A to B. But the spiritual journey is not that kind of journey. We can't measure it because we can't measure the Spirit. Jesus said that the Spirit is like the wind. You can't see where it comes from or where it is going. You can feel it, you can experience it, but you can't measure it. But it is a journey, and like all journeys, it has a beginning. When we first begin anything, whether it's a new year, or whether it's a new job, or a new book, or a new project, when we begin something new, it's a very special moment. There's a special grace in the beginning of anything. And it's almost as if the whole journey is really somehow contained in the beginning, in potential, like a seed contains everything that it is going to grow into. It's very condensed, it's very concentrated, but it's there. And that's why the beginning of anything is very significant, and a time of hope, a time of enthusiasm. We often feel we can make a new start, and we put the past behind us. We set out with new vigor and new enthusiasm. And the same is true of meditation. Now, of course, quite a long spiritual journey has brought us to meditation. And that spiritual journey begins with our conception, with our birth, and with every stage of our human life. But I think that we can always remember very vividly the first time we meditated. I can certainly remember it. And then I can also remember the very first time I tried to meditate. And for quite a while after that, I was starting and stopping and starting and stopping. I was studying at university, and it's very difficult to get a regular discipline into my daily life. And because I'm a very undisciplined person and a very slow learner, I had to become a monk in order to complete my journey. But you don't have to be a monk in order to meditate, as you well know. But where we are all very similar is that we, I think, can remember the beginning of this journey. And it's very helpful when you're beginning any journey to have some kind of idea of where you're going. You may not be able to measure how far you've gone, and I'd like to talk this evening about how we can understand the journey of meditation in a spiritual sense. Because if we are aware of some of the stages that we will pass through, then it will help us to grow, to deepen, and maybe to give up less often. We begin somewhere, sometime. Let's say we begin here, this line. Somebody has taught us about meditation. We have responded to it in some intuitive way. Something in our heart has responded to this teaching of silence and stillness and simplicity. And we're told to say the mantra. And it's a very simple teaching. Perhaps it's the very simplicity of the teaching that attracts us, because we feel very complicated, very confused. Our lives may be very stressed. We may have many problems. And the very simplicity of meditation offers us a wonderful freshness. People often say they have a feeling of coming home when they begin to meditate, or a feeling of great relief that they can move into a deeper openness to God and let go of our words, our thoughts, our images, and so on. So we begin perhaps with a certain enthusiasm, a certain gratitude, and hope, as we do with all beginnings. But then we discover almost immediately that it isn't quite as easy as we thought. It's very simple, but it isn't easy. And it's not easy because we are facing continual distraction. We're saying the mantra as well as we can, but we say it for maybe 2 seconds, and then we start thinking of the phone calls you should have made, the letters you should have written. You start thinking about what was on television last night. You start planning your day tomorrow. Or you may just be daydreaming. And that's quite a surprise and quite a discouragement to all of us, I think, because we thought that something as simple as meditation, as saying the mantra continually with faith and love, would be a little easier. But we discover it is not easy. And it's at this point that many people give up. Many people give up very quickly because they get discouraged or surprised, and they think perhaps, I'm not cut out for this, I can't do this, I'm not a meditator. The important thing to remember is that we all face the same problem of distractions. John Cassian, who wrote this, the 10th conference on meditation in the 4th century, this was the teaching that inspired Father John to restart his journey of meditation. John Cassian focuses precisely on the problem of distractions. He says this is the problem, the universal problem, that everybody has to deal with. So it isn't very nice discovering that we are very distracted, but we're no different from anybody else. And that's where we need perhaps the encouragement and the support of a group, a meditation group. We need the support, encouragement, and the example of other people to help us get through that first hurdle. And many people stop and start maybe a couple of times before they really get going. Now, if we do continue, then very gently, very silently, the mantra begins to drop into our heart, into a deeper level of consciousness. We don't see this happening. You can't measure the progress. It isn't as if it's like 3 inches today and 3 centimeters the next day. We're using metaphors, obviously. Jesus uses the metaphor of growth when he speaks about the kingdom of God. He says the kingdom of God is like a seed that a man takes and he plants it in the soil, and then he goes away. He goes to bed at night, he gets up in the morning, and he does his work. And all the time, the seed is growing in the soil, how he does not know. So the mantra begins to root itself more deeply in our heart. And then it brings us to another level of consciousness. And in this level of consciousness, we find a different kind of distraction. Because this level of consciousness is like the hard disk of our memory, of our lives. Everything that we've ever done, everything that has ever happened, whatever has happened to us, whatever we've thought or said or done or had done to us or think that we had done to us, everything is there, stored away as part of our very personality, our very individuality. Everything that makes up this unique person that God is creating and that we are helping to create, everything is here in this level of consciousness. Now, everything is being integrated here because the purpose of life is to come to wholeness, so that everything that's happened to us fits in eventually to everything else. So we become a whole, integrated person. But some things that happen to us aren't so easy to integrate. Terrible shocks, painful losses, difficult physical or mental suffering, or times of emotional pain or confusion, whether we're very little children, when we don't even understand what's happening, but we feel it. The child doesn't understand perhaps why it may not be receiving the love that it needs, but it feels the pain, and that may shape our personality for the rest of our lives. So everything is here. And some of these great, deeper experiences of life that shape us take a lot of time to integrate. What I mean is then that at this level of consciousness, there is a life, an unconscious life. And it's a very busy place down there, because a lot is being put together, healed. What about hurts that you've received? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone, they've hurt you very deeply. You find it very difficult to forgive. Maybe you get on with life, and after a few weeks or months or years, you don't think about it anymore. But when you do think about it, or when you see that person, or when you even see that person's name, there's a little trigger. And some of those old feelings come back. And maybe you say, well, I don't want to think about that. Let's get on with things. Now, the healing work of prayer is going on at this level as well. And so some of the distractions that we find here will be emotional distractions that may be sometimes unexpected feelings of anger. You know, you sit down to meditate, you're thinking, I'm very peaceful and calm, and then suddenly you find yourself afterwards very irritable, very edgy, and you say to yourself, why am I feeling so angry? Or maybe it's a sadness, and you don't quite know where this sadness is. Not, terrible depression, but it's a sort of a lingering sadness, or an old pain that you're not quite sure where it came from. Now, remember Jesus' teaching about the kingdom of God, the seed. Just leave it there. You don't have to dig it up every 5 minutes and look at it. We can trust. The whole of this journey is a journey of faith. We can trust that the healing is being done at this level, and therefore we can be prepared from time to time for some emotional pain, or some emotional difficulties, or just changes of mood. And we may not know exactly where this feeling of sadness or grief or anger or whatever is coming from. And maybe we don't need to. But sometimes, if we do need to know, then we will know. And a particular memory will break into the surface of our consciousness. And we suddenly find ourselves thinking a lot about a particular relationship of the past or phase of your life, and you're sort of almost working it through without knowing it, but you're thinking about it a lot, and you don't quite know why, and maybe you have to ask yourself some questions or face some things that you didn't face before. And gradually it begins to be resolved or integrated. The important thing here is to keep saying the mantra. At this level of consciousness, the danger is that you give up because you think, up here, level 1, you think, I'm just too scatty, too distracted, too all over the place. And you give up. The danger here is a little different. The danger there is that you might become a little too interested in yourself. Because here there's a kind of soap opera going on. And it's the best of all soap operas, because you wrote it, you act in it, and you were the audience. So the danger here is that we get too, over-interested or over-absorbed in our psychological process. What you need to think about, but don't interfere, don't dig up the seed continually. And again, this is where community and spiritual friendship will be very helpful to you. Remember, the journey of meditation, although it is a solitary journey, it is not a lonely journey. It is the end of loneliness. The journey of meditation leads us into community. And the experience of community, of spiritual friendship, a different kind of relationship than we're used to, different kind of friendship, but a real and deep and precious gift on our spiritual journey is this experience of spiritual friendship. And that also will be a very important way for us to deal with some difficulties at this level. Okay, so we keep going. We're still meditating, and now we're learning more and more to listen to the mantra as we say it. At this level, up here, you're saying the mantra with a lot of distractions, and it seems as if you have to make a lot of effort to keep coming back to it. At this level, it goes a little deeper, and it's as if you're sounding the mantra more in your heart. And then increasingly, we come to listen to it. And Father John said that it's when we begin to listen to the mantra that our journey is really beginning. So where do we go from here? The next level of consciousness that we run into is like a brick wall. And the cloud of unknowing says that the brick wall here is like the naked awareness of self, the naked awareness of ourself. It's as if here we just run into our own ego, our own self-consciousness. It's not good or bad, it's just a block. And we can't get through it on our own. The cloud of unknowing says that this is why here we experience the sorrow of existence. And it's a beautiful idea, because it's not the same as depression, But the sorrow of existence is the sorrow, the sadness that we feel because the ego always prevents us from being fully open, fully present. The ego means that we can't give ourselves totally to another person or to God. So the ego is like a ball and chain in a way that prevents us from running, from being really free. It's that self-consciousness, that self-doubt, it's that little bit that we hold back even from the most loving relationships. So what do we do here as we meet this naked awareness of ourself? Well, by this time, we have learned to say the mantra in faith, more simply, even in the face of distractions, and the distractions, of course, continue. But we are now able to say the mantra with less effort, but more attention. We come to listen to it. So now we've learned the discipline of the mantra, and it's the discipline that will set us free. The purpose of any discipline is to lead us into liberty. So here we are at the brick wall. All we can do is to wait, to be present, to be faithful, and wait for grace. And then, quite unexpectedly, a brick comes out of the wall here. Maybe another brick falls out of the wall here. And then we see through the wall. The wall is still there, but we can see through it. We see there's something on the other side of this ego, that I actually have a greater potential for oneness, for union, for love, for giving myself, for being with others, for being with God, than I thought. It's just a little glimpse, but it's a joyful glimpse. And so, although on this side of the wall you have the sorrow of existence, on the other side you find the joy of being. So the little bricks fall out of the wall. And what are the bricks? Maybe a fear, or a resentment, or some way that we're defending ourselves against God and against love, against other people, or a prejudice, or some kind of guilt or shame, or some desire that is not appropriate. Little by little, these desires and fears of the ego begin to drop out. And now, it's at this level that we break out of the circle altogether. It is here that we move beyond the ego into the spirit, into our spirit. And the spirit, you remember, cannot be measured. It's boundless, it's free, it's loving, it's peaceful, it's joyful, and it takes many forms. Father John said that it is at this place in our journey that we, at the frontier of our identity, that we meet a guide. And we recognize this guide as the risen Christ. Of course, Jesus has been present to us at every stage of the journey, even up here with all our silly distractions, even here in our inner pain and loneliness, and here as we carry the daily cross of our ego. He's present to us. But it is here that in a very special way, and a very personal way, we experience and recognize him. You remember in the Gospel of John, Mary of Magdala comes to the empty tomb and she weeps because Jesus has been taken away from her. She turns and she sees Jesus standing there in the garden, but she doesn't recognize him. She thinks he is the gardener. And she says to him, "Where have you put the body of Jesus?" And Jesus says to her, "Why are you weeping?" Question that is a very compassionate and healing question. And then he says to her, "Mary." And at that instant her eyes are opened and she recognizes him. And she says, "Rabboni, Master." Now the whole of the Christian journey is about coming to this experience of recognition. It's as we move into self-knowledge, and remember the whole of this journey is bringing us into deeper and clearer self-knowledge. It is when we move beyond the ego into the knowledge of our true self that we are also able to recognize Jesus. And so here, our journey in Jesus, with him and through him, in the Spirit, moves into the infinite and boundless ocean of God. Now, the important thing to remember about this is that all of this goes on at the same time. It isn't as if this takes 3 months, this takes another 3 months, and this takes another 3 months. It doesn't work like that. You can't measure it. That's why it's helpful to have other models of the journey as well. We could flip this around if it was a computer and give it a different sort of shape. So we're still distracted, of course. But maybe our distractions are a little less. Our mind is calmer. And also, we're not so worried about our distractions. We don't judge our meditation just by how distracted we are. And, of course, we will be integrating and healing our memories and our past experiences until the end of our lives, because new things are always going to be happening to us. But we will be learning increasingly that it is not by judging others that we resolve our conflicts or difficulties with them, but it is by forgiveness. It is here more and more that we learn the power and the meaning of forgiveness, and what it really means. And of course we will have an ego until the end of our lives. But the ego may be a little more under control, a little less of a bully, and a little more of a servant. Ego is important. We need a good ego, but we need the ego to be in its place. So all of this continues, even while this deeper opening of our being to the Spirit and a recognition of Jesus in daily life, we recognize Jesus at all these levels then. So we have to see that this is an organic process going on at different levels at different times. And each of us is going to have slightly different, experiences at these different levels. But the purpose of this is simply to give you a sense of certain stages that we pass through that then have to be integrated and we move on. And there's a kind of a cyclical movement here too. But that there is a progressive movement. And in the Christian vision, it is into union with the person of Jesus, in a loving, faith-filled union, and then going with him on his journey in the Spirit to the Father, the boundless mystery of life itself.